It's the Fantasy Pros NFL show, back again for another best ball special. I'm Tom Strachan. I've written a lot of best ball content for Fantasy Pros over the last 2 years, but today I'm here on screen with Andrew Erickson, getting ready to do battle against each other in the Drafters $15 million championship contest. Andrew, we've drafted a bunch of teams together, whether it's here on the Fantasy Pros channel or on my channel, the Fantasy Sanctuary, but tonight we're going head-to-head to see who can draft the best team, and then let the viewers and listeners decide. They can vote on it, drop comments here on YouTube, leave reviews over on podcast formats. I've been warming up for this all off-season. I've done maybe 300 drafts already. Are you intimidated?
A little bit, because now I know that you're going to tell me actually how you feel about all the picks I make, because it's one thing when we're on a team and you're going to be like, okay, yeah, Erickson, that makes sense. Like, I'll roll with that. I need to get my exposure up with this particular player that I haven't drafted at all, but because you're, the analyst here, I got to play host and I got to let you pick your picks. Well, no, now we're both host analysts. We're both going at it head to head. So I'm ready to go.
The one thing I love about drafters, it's so different to all the other formats. You go on these other formats and you're talking about playoff tournaments, you're looking at advancement. But with drafters, it just comes down to really drafting the very best team. This contest, you are taking on everyone from day one. It really is just an incredible opportunity to elevate your fantasy football experience. You can join the Drafters Million Free Best Ball Championship, where you can turn a $15 entry into a shot at $500,000. The total prize pool, it's $2.5 million, 28,800 paid spots in this tournament. And there's a really strong chance for plus EV entries, because this contest at the minute, it's only 54% full. It is tracking way below the kind of numbers it needs per day to fill. So there's going to be less entries in this contest, which makes it easier for you to get into the paid spots. And here's how it works. The contest, it runs from weeks 1 to 17, boasts best ball PPR style weekly scoring, a total points format with no playoffs. Your top performing QB, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, tight end and flex automatically count towards your weekly score. It's 12 team drafts, 20 rounds, fast and slow draft options available. This close to the season, I would stay away from the slow drafts, because they're going to start speeding the clocks up and it is going to get chaotic. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity to turn $15 into $500K and be crowned the 2024 Drafters NFL Best Ball Championship. Take advantage of this partnership between Drafters and Fantasy Pros to elevate your fantasy sports experience by joining Drafters Million Free Contest. Use code FANTASYPROS for a 100% deposit match. So, Andrew, we are waiting for 4 more people to join. I feel like whilst we get to this, let's talk about CeeDee Lamb, because he signed his brand new contract today. And over the previous week, I've seen CeeDee Lamb dropping as far as the 105 in drafts. I had questions from people saying, is it safe to draft CeeDee Lamb? Is he going to be able to hit the ground running when he gets back out there? How have you been treating him over these last week or two? Have you still been drafting him aggressively?
Yeah, I think I haven't really changed my stance on CeeDee Lamb since the contract negotiations have been going on, since he's been holding out. I know yesterday on Sunday, it was either Saturday or Sunday, I tweeted out, hey, if CeeDee Lamb or Jamar Chase falls, I'm going to draft them. Like, that's the way that you need to approach this. And I think that this is the first domino to fall. Looking back last week, I was reading a report from The Athletic that kind of outlined the situation in terms of once Lamb gets a deal done, at least from my understanding from reading that article, was very similar to what we saw back, I don't even remember what year it was, but it was when AJ Green was looking for an extension. Julio Jones got a massive deal, and then right after that, AJ Green got his deal from the Bengals. So I think that they're going to follow suit here. We see CeeDee Lamb get his massive deal. We saw Jamar Chase at least back at practice, so that's a good sign. So I think they're going to get this done for Jamar Chase as they start a game plan for week 1, they get to play the New England Patriots. Should be a fun game to watch.
Yeah. For me, it was always just, he was going to sign a contract at some point. CeeDee Lamb didn't start off insanely good last year. It was after the bye week for the Cowboys in week 8 where CeeDee Lamb became a complete league winner. So maybe it takes a little bit longer, and maybe I'm waiting a few weeks for him to ramp up. But in best ball, we can kind of live with that. In drafters, it is a slight difference, because we do want to make sure that, we're not giving up points too much, because we're playing against the whole field from day one, potentially 180,000 people. We don't want to be drafting players who could be unavailable for a long time unless we're well covered at other positions. Is there any other players who you view in that bucket of, just mark them down slightly in this format compared to other best ball sites?
It's interesting. I think for me, I am looking at probably those injured players that concern me a little bit more, guys that I'm not really sure what the shelf life is. again, the spike weeks still matter because that's ultimately how the points are accumulated. It's not just, okay, you're just taking all these guys, adding up all their points. It is still based on their highest and best weekly performances. But I think that too, maybe it's not downgrading certain players, but maybe upgrading players that, hey, I'm confident this guy is going to be a starter for the long term and he's going to be consistently hitting my lineup every single week. So when those guys, I don't want to view them as the downside players per se, but players, he's steady. I think that he fills a role on his offense that I like. So those are the players I tend to gravitate a little bit more towards in these types of formats as opposed to in the underdog scoring where it's really based more on the playoffs at the end of the year where you really need to hit 15, 16, 17. This case, you can take a little bit more of that front loaded production because it does help you, especially in the long run.
Yeah, so we've got the draft ready to go. 15 seconds left till we get underway. Andrew, you've got the 3 spot. I'm slap bang in the middle, kind of at the 7th spot. How do you feel about the 3 spot?
I love the 3 spot. This is perfect for me. It means I can essentially lock in Jamar Chase or Breece Hall because it's going to be at least McCaffrey, Lamb, Tyreek Hill, a combination of those guys going in the top 3, which is what I assume that we're going to see. So yeah, McCaffrey, CeeDee Lamb, the first 2 guys to go off. So the Lamb fall has stopped, it seems like, since he signed his contract. So
I'm shocked, I tell you.
Exactly. So I'm going to go with Breece. I think Breece, for me, he is my 101 overall this year. I think that he can be the number 1 running back. I think he can be the number 1 scoring player in fantasy football. So even though it is PPR, which does give a boost to receivers, Breece Hall showed last year that he is a more than competent receiver in the passing game. He almost had 100 targets. It's funny. You have to actually look up and do a double take of who had more targets last year, Brandon Ayuk or Breece Hall. And it's pretty close.
Love that one. Yeah, so I take Bijan Robinson out of a 7 after it went McCaffrey, Lamb, Breece Hall, Tyreek Hill, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamar Chase, who, of course, that's kind of the next pivot point. Is it Jamar Chase? It feels like he's not getting a contract, but he's back out there training, and he's just going to have to accept that the Bengals got what they wanted on this one, and he'll get paid next year. But do you reckon we see a Brandon Ayuk contract extension, perhaps?
I think we're going to see the Ayuk contract, and it's weird because Ayuk, I really opened up the season really high on after how excellent he was last year. And with each coming day, each passing day where he hasn't been the stud at training camp like he was last year. You know, the way that they're raving about Deebo Samuel in training camp and how he's Brock Purdy's guy because there's no McCaffrey, there's no Ayuk. Well, that makes me feel like Ayuk's not going to be as good as he was last year because he's been missing all this time with the offense and kind of being more of a distraction than someone that's trying to raise the offense and raise the ceiling of what we can see from the 49ers after they lost the Super Bowl last year. So I've been kind of cooling on Ayuk, and it's not even because I'm not sure what team he's going to play for. I feel pretty confident he's going to be on the 49ers, and specifically in this format where, okay, by the time week 16, 17, 18 come around, I think Ayuk will be back in the offense, a stalwart part of the offense. But I think especially in redraft too, Ayuk, someone I'm not touching because I'm very afraid and concerned about a cold start for Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah, definitely. And we've touched on it before, but Trent Williams still holding out as well. And that feels like potentially even more impactful for the Niners than Brandon Ayuk. Since I picked Justin Jefferson, AJ Brown, Puka Nacua, taken at the 10 spot, back at training today. And it seems like the days of getting Puka Nacua into the second round might be over. Then Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison, Drake London, Deebo Samuel, and Jonathan Taylor. So for me, as we come round to this second pick, after starting with Bijan Robinson, I'm frightened to do these double running back builds because you get locked out of the wide receiver position so quickly. And there's situations where I will do it, and I have done it more on other platforms of late than I have been doing this season. I'm not in on Devontae Adams at his cost, particularly with Gardner Minshew there. But I do like Nico Collins, so I'm more than happy to take him and make him my wide receiver 1. I think Nico Collins is absolutely just going to come on leaps and bounds this year. Andrew, you've got a couple of picks to go until yours. Who's the player who you'd love to get there?
I am looking at Achane. So I'm going to embrace the running back life potentially. So we'll see how that goes. It depends on what receiver falls to me. Again, you mentioned Devontae Adams. Adams is a very weird player to look at this year because there are scenarios where in a draft I was in last night, I got him again. It was a 2 quarterback league, but he ended up being my wide receiver 4. Devontae Adams is a wide receiver 4. So there are certain times when he falls and it's just too far because in
Yeah.
full PPR, we still think he's going to get 150 targets. Even if they're not great targets, 150 targets, 150 targets. And Adams is seeing that. He's going to at least pay off a round 3 ADP. So again, speaking of the devil, Devontae Adams is there on the top of the board. I think for me, it's just I'm going to go with my guy. He's been my guy all year, and I think that he's worth a round 2 pick in redraft leagues. You don't have to usually even reach him this far, but I feel comfortable doing it. So I'm going with Jalen Waddle.
I had my home league draft yesterday, and we're kind of in probably year 10 now. And we use a platform whose name I'd rather not mention here, but the ADP is all over the place on it. And I was sure that I would end up with one of Jalen Waddle or Malik Neighbors falling to me in like the 4th round. And neither of them did. And that's the content creator curse that you put out all this content banging on about how wildly underpriced some of these players are. And in this draft, of course, you see Malik Neighbors and Jalen Waddle going in the 2nd round. But yeah, so Breece Hall and Jalen Waddle start for Andrew. Bijan Robinson and Nico Collins start for myself. So both starting with a running back and wide receiver. Back to you, Andrew, in round 3 for your 3rd pick.
Yeah, so I definitely was looking at Olave as an option. Talked about Ayuk, not super pumped about him in particular. I could go with a receiver. Definitely probably going to go with the receiver. So I'm going to go with, I think I'm going to take DJ Moore actually. So DJ Moore to me was somebody that I wasn't really sure. I think when I initially posted one of my wide receiver bust articles, DJ Moore was someone that I was kind of shying away from a little bit. And the more I kind of thought about it was, I think that he's a good pick at his ADP because we've seen DJ Moore with all different types of quarterbacks still be very productive. And last year we saw him be a wide receiver 1 with Justin Fields. So again, is that going to carry over with a different quarterback? I'm not so sure, especially with the target competition where it is. But I do also feel that DJ Moore has the requisite skill set to potentially rise above any target concerns. We've seen him win after the catch. We've seen him win downfield. So I think that worst case scenario, I think he meets his ADP. Best case scenario is if Caleb Williams is that guy, we could really see him take off because I'm more concerned, honestly, about Keenan Allen than DJ Moore.
Yeah, definitely. And I was quite aggressive on Keenan Allen for a large part of draft season, but I've shied away a bit from him. I'm taking him probably half as much of the time as I was previously. I'll take Mike Evans. He's a player I probably don't draft as much as I should because, as you and me have talked about all offseason, we're in on Chris Godwin at his cost. And Mike Evans, I find difficult to take at the 2-3 turn where he goes a lot of the time, but slipping down to this point in the 3rd, I would have taken Ayuk there. I would have taken Kyron Williams there. Rashee Rice, I don't mind. But the thing with Rashee Rice is we've seen his price fluctuate so much during this offseason. There was a point where you could get him maybe 30, 40 picks later than this, and now he's absolutely rocketed back up the board because the threat of a suspension seemingly was non-existent and the Chiefs weren't expecting it. I know today Monday when the Chiefs signed Juju Smith-Schuster back to the roster, that some people took that as a sign that maybe Hollywood Brown's injury is worse than it is, or maybe Rashee Rice could end up getting suspended this year. Personally, I kind of see that more of just Mecole Hardman, Sky Moore, and Kadarius Toney are all completely dust. But it does raise an interesting question, and I think for me, Rashee Rice was always a player I could take up to about pick 36, but now I'm just kind of shying away a little. Would you still draft him into the 3rd round at that cost?
I think that right now he's probably overpriced because it's interesting because Rice, again, I think I tweeted this out probably a month ago saying he was the easiest click in all of fantasy football. And then basically everything went my way. It seemed like he wasn't get suspended. Marquise Brown suffered the shoulder injury. So again, the cold takes didn't come after me quite yet, but Rice still has to hit, right? He still needs to be worth a round 3 pick. And now I'm looking more at the concerns about him in this offense. Well, they added a bunch of different playmakers. Like, how locked and loaded is he as the number 1 guy in this offense after they added a player in the 1st round? And something that it reminds me of, this is something that I had to learn the hard way, was I loved Elijah Moore his rookie year. Thought he was so good. And I was almost blinded by that, despite the fact that I loved Garrett Wilson, who the Jets then drafted the following year as a 1st round pick. And I looked the other way at the draft capital, what that tells you about how they view their roster. And if you ask the Chiefs who they view as their best receiver, it may not be Rice. It may be Worthy that they think is their number 1 guy. So again, they play different roles, so we'll see how things shake out. But if it's Rice at round 3 versus Worthy's ADP and I was picking one, I would definitely pick Worthy. But again, this is a very aggressive price on Rice. And in most redraft leagues, he's still buried in their ADP. So round 4 or 5 is really more my style when it comes to going after Rice, where round 3, I think, is pushing the envelope a little bit.
Yeah, I take Zay Flowers there as my wide receiver 3. It feels like this format, you want to make sure you're marrying a nice floor with a high ceiling, and Zay Flowers is going to be an integral part of this Ravens offense, and it feels like there's another leap for him to be able to take, a leap for this whole Ravens offense to take under Todd Monken for the second year running. Lamar Jackson, as long as he's healthy, can be a league winner. So yeah, I'm happy to pair Zay Flowers there with Mike Evans and Nico Collins. One pick away, Andrew. Michael Pittman goes off the board right before you. Let us know who you're going to take, and then let's circle back to Michael Pittman.
Yeah, I wanted Michael Pittman, of course, but I get sniped by Harkon 1, I think is his name. Harkon 11. Oh, God. All right, so let's see what I'm doing here. 14 seconds. Okay, so I want to go with a receiver. So I'm going to go with take T. Higgins.
T. Higgins is a nice value there. Yeah, I think I've been drafting quite a bit of T. Higgins. I think all the reports out of training camp are that he's healthy, that the Bengals seem in a good place. And if Jamar Chase starts the season slow, then T. Higgins should surely benefit. But we've talked a lot, gone back and forth about Michael Pittman. I was less warm on him than yourself, but as Josh Downs got injured, I've found myself drafting Michael Pittman more, coincidentally at a time where he's slipping because there seem to be a few concerns about Anthony Richardson out there. Have you just been taking all the dip that you can on Michael Pittman, or are you a little bit concerned?
I'm not, because I thought the concern was the passing volume. But when I'm watching these preseason games, all they're doing is drop back into throw with Anthony Richardson. So, yeah, I'm not thrilled that he's not the most uber accurate quarterback ever, but we kind of knew that going in. So for me, as long as the passing volume is still up and up, I feel great about it. So I'm going to keep drafting Michael Pittman, especially when he falls into round 4. I think that's just a great price for him. So I'm going to take my elite tight end here, and so you can't have him. So I'm taking Mark Andrews.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely well covered on the Mark Andrews front, but I like that build. I think having an elite tight end, I put out a video on my channel about how much of a difference maker they can be, and you see it in all formats, whether it's playoff best ball on other sites or whether it's cumulative scoring like here on Drafters. So I'm going to take Dalton Kincaid. He's not a player that I draft huge amounts of because I end up drafting more Mark Andrews. I end up drafting more Kyle Pitts, who goes a little bit later than Dalton Kincaid often. But I like having that elite tight end, having 3 wide receivers already and the running back. It feels pretty good. So through 5 rounds, I've got Bijan Robinson, Nico Collins, Mike Evans, Zay Flowers, and Dalton Kincaid. Andrew has Breece Hall, Jalen Waddle, DJ Moore, T. Higgins, and Mark Andrews. How you feeling? We've got identical types of builds so far, Andrew.
Clearly, we've drafted a couple teams together. Clearly, you can see that. So I love the build so far. Hero RB start, smashing receivers with a lot of upside, especially a lot of weekly upside. Waddle, DJ Moore, T. Higgins. I guess, to me, I'm also looking at embracing some of that chaos. Guys go down, guys get injured. You could see games where Waddle, DJ Moore, T. Higgins, are they always going to be the highest scoring player on their team every single week? Probably not, but there are going to be weeks where they do have those spikes in production, and in the best ball format, I'm going to capture every single one of them. And one thing I want to point out, too, when it comes to the elite tight end is specifically something I like to do a lot in redraft, but even more in best ball because you don't have access to the waiver wire. So I was in a draft last night where I punted tight end. It wasn't my strategy going in, but it just kind of worked out that way. So I ended up drafting Dallas Goedert with one of my last picks because everybody had their tight end. So I just took tight end 12 on the board. Dallas Goedert probably finished tight end 12, so he's fine. But what I have the ability to do in a redraft league is I can use Dallas Goedert, or I can use another tight end that breaks out on the waiver wire. So I can move and mix and match tight ends on the waiver wire in addition to having Dallas Goedert as the guy. If I can't find anything else better, I'll just roll with Goddard. But in best ball, you don't have that option. You pick your guys that you think might hit, those 3 late round guys, maybe 4, and you just cross your fingers and hope that you didn't draft Jelani Woods. Like, that's what you're looking for. So that is a bit of a difference. You can get away without elite tight end a little bit more in a standard redraft league than you can in a best ball, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I just think like the ceiling that the elite tight ends have, it's so hard to overcome when it hits, and it doesn't always hit. Last year we saw Sam Laporta or Trey McBride, these kind of late round guys, absolutely smash. But yeah, I would stack less than normal on drafters compared to other best ball platforms because we're not looking for that 1 week massive spike week so much. But if I'm not going to ignore it altogether because we're still betting on an outcome of an offense. If I'm saying Mike Evans is going to be great and take him in the third round, then I still want to take Chris Godwin. So hopefully now that allows Baker Mayfield to fall to me and I can set up a bit of a buck stack. This draft room is quite interesting. You can see below everyone's username, the amount of drafts I've done in this contest. You can see I've got a bunch of slows going at the top, but I have been mainly in the Superflex contest and one of the other contests that Drafters has done this offseason. But there's a lot of people who haven't entered an awful lot of contests in here. A few people, this is their first one. A few people like us under 5. And this is a time of year where people are going to be getting in here. There'll be a lot of people who haven't drafted on the platform before, don't understand the nuances of the format. And that's why it's just a really good time to sign up. Like, use the code FantasyPros for 100% deposit match up to $100. That's going to get you over 6 free entries. I mean, you're free rolling 6 free entries against the $100 you deposit. Use the link in the description to redeem this offer. Join the contest today. It really is going to be a very fun 10 days or so as drafters. There's going to be a lot of drafts happening constantly. You took James Conner as your second running back here. Is he somebody that you feels quite undervalued, or is he just somebody that you felt you wanted to get before the running back tiers changed?
I think he's one of the last guys I feel good about in that RB2 slot for me, whether it's in best ball or redraft, because when he's playing healthy, he's going to be productive. I have no concerns of a workload split at all. I know he's not big on third downs, but that we saw that happen last year, and he was still very, very productive. So I'm very high on this Cardinals offense overall. I think it can be really productive, especially in the run game. So James Conner, to me, I think that he's going to easily pay off where you end up drafting him, even if he doesn't last the whole season. Again, I think if he gives me good 10 weeks, I can backfill the second half of my year with some other running back production. But for now, back on the clock, and I got to go. I mean, of course, I have to pick this guy, if not just for the bid itself. So I'm going to go with Jack Smith-Njigba, who I retweeted the Rashee Rice tweet, said no longer more. Rashee Rice is no longer the easiest click in fantasy football because now he's going around 3. So that doesn't work. It's now Jackson Smith-Njigba. And maybe I was coursed a little bit with the highlight that he made in the preseason game. Hey, I'm only human, man. I like when football players make good plays. So
I'm like sorry. Good plays too, Andrew. It's okay.
But I was just thinking more about JSN, his profile, how his rookie year really went. Again, not the best rookie season, but not horrible. Not, oh my God, this guy had a Quentin Johnston level-esque season. Again, an Ohio State product coming in with very, very, very high expectations after he missed a lot of his final year, basically the entire final year at the college level. And then he was dealing with a wrist injury to start his rookie season. So I think JSN, look, Tyler Lockett seems like he's a declining asset in that passing game, in that receiving game. I think JSN is clearly going to be the number 2 guy here. I've written about targeting number 2 receivers on offenses. I mean, that's entirely what my team is right now. It's got JSN number 2. We've got T. Higgins number 2. DJ Moore, he's a number 1, but Crowded and Jalen Waddle, another number 2 guy. So I like taking the discounts on these number 2 receivers in offenses where maybe it's not just a number 1, number 2. It's more of a 1A, 1B. And what we've seen from Metcalf, at least at the NFL level, he's never really established himself as the clear-cut number 1. It's always been a 1A, 1B with Tyler Lockett. So if JSN can kind of take on that production in Ryan Grubb's offense, I've just loved what I've heard out of camp this year with JSN. I think he's just a good person to bet on. Second-year breakout, especially where his price is, which is even cheaper in most home league drafts.
Yeah, I love JSN. I've got a healthy amount of him across best ball platforms. I was looking at taking Anthony Richardson there. He'd fallen 12 picks past ADP. I would not have minded that I didn't have him with Michael Pittman, but the Michael Pittman draft out of a 4 spot does take him. So instead, when it falls to me, I took CJ Stroud, stacking him with Nico Collins, who I took in round 2. 78, 79, that's a fair range to be taking CJ Stroud. When drafts opened and you were talking about like a 4th, 5th round pick for CJ Stroud, I just couldn't get on board with it. I think, then you're automatically talking about a guy who has to throw for 250 passing yards on average and 3 touchdowns per game to be able to compete with the top guys. But at this cost, it's fine. And also, the team out of the 12 spot has Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell, so I wasn't going to push CJ Stroud, try to get him to come back at a bit of a value. Instead, lock up that quarterback. And so now I have Bijan Robinson, Nico Collins, Mike Evans, Zay Flowers, Dalton Kincaid, Chris Godwin, and CJ Stroud, whilst Andrew has Breece Hall, Jalen Waddle, DJ Moore, T. Higgins, Mark Andrews, James Conner, and Jackson Smith and Jigba. This is the area of the draft where I love the running backs. Like, with 4 wide receivers, an elite tight end, a really good quarterback, and a hero running back, it feels like a nice time to turn to the running back position. And one player who I've been drafting a little bit more lately than I would have done through most of the offseason, it's Javonte Williams. When the season opened, I really found it a difficult to click on Javonte, but everything we've seen, he sounds to be healthy. Everything the team talks about, it seems like he's going to be the RB1 there. And maybe he is mixing in with guys like Jaleel McLaughlin, Audric Estime, maybe even Blake Watson, maybe Samaje P. Ryan if he doesn't get cut. But there's going to be other backs back there at times. But we know Bo Nix is a check down machine. We know last year the Broncos, Russell Wilson led the league in check down rate when kept clean without pressure. And that's a Sean Payton thing. Sean Payton running backs always see a lot of receptions, so I'm fine taking Javonte Williams in this PPR-heavy format. Andrew, you take our guy, Jaylen Warren. Any concerns about him and his hamstring injury going into the season? I know he said he could have played this weekend if he needed to, and that he'll be ready for week 1. But players always tend to say, I'd be ready to play.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not great to have a lower soft tissue injury with a running back. You got to use your legs. So that is somewhat concerning, but I want to buy the dip on Jaylen Warren because I think that, hamstring aside, I think that he's teed up to smash this season in this run heavy attack. I think that he's better than Najee Harris. He showed that. And something I wanted to bring up when you drafted Javonte. Javonte is an undrafted free agent at the end of the year. And so is Jaylen Warren. Yeah. These teams have an incentive to ride these guys into the ground. That's what teams do. And I think Jaylen Warren's going to show, hey, I should be the running back you pay and not Najee Harris next year. So I think Jaylen, if he's healthy, especially in the full PPR where he showed last year how often he was used as a receiver in the passing game. You know, we saw Arthur Smith not do a lot of things that we liked last year, but he did target the running back in the passing game a ton. So I think that's going to be Jaylen Warren's role. So I do like Jaylen Warren a lot, especially, again, when you said I love the running backs in this range, I immediately shifted the cue to all running backs and follow Tom, and you did not let me down. So another guy I'm going to take here, I'm actually torn between, there's 2 running backs I really both like here, but I am going to go with one over the other because he's someone that I've risen up the rankings throughout the preseason because and it's not because of usage per se, it's because he's just looked really good. And that's Tony Pollard to me. He's just looked like his old explosive self. And I think that maybe it's recency bias with Tony Pollard. Everybody was so high on Tony Pollard last year. We were all super excited in this full-time role. And then he had essentially the worst run out you could possibly ask for any running back. Again, he had the second most red zone touches behind only Christian McCaffrey and barely scored any touchdowns. My fun fact, again, Ezekiel Elliott on the Patriots scored more red zone touchdowns than Tony Pollard did last year. That just makes me want to cry. So for me, Tony Pollard, yes, they paid him. Yes, he's in a 50-50 split essentially with Tajay Spears, but I still think he is the 1A to Spears' 1B. And let's say he's the preferred guy at the goal line in the red zone. Well, I think that makes a big difference. If he's the one scoring the touchdowns, then I think Tony Pollard can be in for a bounce back season. I think he can definitely beat or meet his ADP, where this is a guy we were taking inside the top 24, not thinking twice about it. Now he goes almost outside the top 100 picks. And that's not just in best ball. That's in all formats. Tony Pollard goes extremely late. So I think he still has some league winning upside. And I'm going to go back to the well with Pollard.
Yeah, and it seems like his usage, he is going to be just slightly ahead of Tajay Spears. It seems like the running back scheme is going to be integral to what they're trying to do in Tennessee to support Will Levis, so I like that. I drafted Brian Robinson as my 3rd running back. He's somebody I've been incredibly high on all offseason. I'm not particularly high on Austin Eckler. I don't think that the ways Austin Eckler scores points are particularly conducive to this offense. Perhaps I'm wrong on that. Maybe he comes back from the high ankle sprain he has last year and just looks incredible. But it's not like we've been getting those reports out of camp. Instead, it's all been like Brian Robinson looks great. The team views Brian Robinson as an RB1 and everything along those lines. So Brian Robinson could very well end up as my most drafted running back through several hundred drafts by the time that things close in 10 days' time. After him, we see Jerome Ford go. Jerome Ford's somebody who is an excellent best ball target at the minute. if you want to go heavy on the rookie running backs later, guys like Jonathan Brooks, Marshawn Lloyd, pairing him with Jerome Ford, who we know is going to see early season production whilst Nick Chubb is injured and out and not playing games. That's a great best ball tactic. That's a way which, particularly on a platform like Drafters, you can negate the issues of taking zeros from one player if you're locking in that early season production. It will be very interesting to see where Nick Chubb goes in this one. Around the turn, we saw David Njoku go, and then Rico Dowdle, who I know you like. If he'd come back to me, I would have also drafted Rico Dowdle there. As it is, the wide receivers, it doesn't feel too pretty. I only have 4, and I would rather have 5 by this point, but there's nobody I really want. So I'm going to take Jonathan Brooks. I need a running back without a week 14 bye, and this will give me 4 through this point, and I can probably finish with 5 running backs in total. If you love catching live sports as much as I do, you're going to want to hear this. It's still baseball season, and Game Time is an authorized ticket place of Major League Baseball, making it super easy to score tickets last minute. Prices actually drop closer to the first pitch, so you can grab killer deals with an all-in pricing and seat views right from your phone. I've had a blast using Game Time to check out upcoming games and other high-profile events. The app, it just makes it so easy to find great deals and see exactly what you're going to see when you're at the game before you buy the tickets. My favorite deals are the last-minute deals and the zone deals. Game Time's last-minute deals can help you save up to 60% on last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theatre, so much out there. With zone deals, you can save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose your seats for you. No matter what kind of ticket or deal you're looking to get, Game Time simplifies the ticket buying process and saves you money in the process. Plus, they have a lowest price guarantee, so you know you're getting the best deal. If they're wrong, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code FantasyPros for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's create an account, redeem code FantasyPros for $20 off. Andrew, you came back on the clock there and took your 5th running back in Trey Benson. Are you feeling confident that Trey Benson is going to be a good option this year? And you've locked in the handcuff behind James Conner there. Is that something that you kind of believe is a worthwhile process in best ball?
I think depending on the certain situation, I think it seems pretty clear in my mind that James Conner is going to be the 2-down back, very productive until he gets injured. I feel pretty confident saying that he's probably going to sustain an injury at some point, which I don't love to say, but it's just being realistic when it comes to the guy, and he's in a contract year. And I think they drafted Trey Benson to be the running back of the future. So we've seen this before where rookie running back here, last 4 weeks of the season, gets the start. We saw it last year with Zamir White. He was an absolute monster down the stretch. So I don't know when that's going to come for Trey Benson. And that's why it's tough for me to sometimes click him in redraft, because I'm going to have to hold him on my roster the entire year waiting for James Conner to get hurt. Don't know when that will happen, but I am confident that when Conner misses time, they're going to call Trey Benson because this is his role. It's going to be his role in 2025 at least. And I think they're definitely want to at least see what they have with him towards the end of the year. So I'm kind of, again, balancing out my roster. I believe in James Conner to kind of be someone to start my team off really well. And hopefully Trey Benson can be that late season hammer that I need to kind of push me over the edge.
Yeah, I think I'm more open to handcuffing in best ball than I used to be. I think there's definitely value in it. I'm going to take Brandon Cooks. I think it's quite clear that he is the wide receiver 2 in Dallas. And as much as I enjoyed drafting Jalen Tolbert when he was in the 20th round, it feels like Brandon Cooks' role is quite secure. And he also gives me another wide receiver on a different bye week. I currently have Nico Collins, Zay Flowers, CJ Stroud, Javonte Williams, and Brian Robinson on week 14 buys. So I'm trying not to overload those week 14 buys too much going forward. But yeah, otherwise, through my draft with 4 running backs, 5 wide receivers, a tight end, and a quarterback, I feel like I've got quite a lot of flexibility. Andrew, you've got 5 running backs at this point. You've got 4 wide receivers, quarterback, and a tight end. Is there anything that you feel is an immediate need, or are you going to be quite open to just playing the board for a little while?
Want to play the board, but definitely putting the emphasis on trying to get a couple more wide receivers in there. I just, again, you signaled the bat signal basically for those running backs, and it's basically all I can see now. And I did draft Tua, so I got a nice little stack there with Jalen Waddle. I think Tua is another one of these really undervalued quarterbacks. Again, he's not a rusher, so he's not a top 5 guy in any capacity, but we saw him lead the NFL in passing yards last year because he has elite weapons. He's an elite pocket passer from a fantasy perspective, from a statistics perspective, and his schedule to open the year, just shootout after shootout after shootout. Basically, the first 8 weeks for the Miami Dolphins are just all shootouts. So I expect big numbers from this Dolphins passing game and running game, and I'm glad I was able to get a little stack going.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's pick 72 through to 110. It's an area where I've done a bunch of research into the kind of running backs that come out of it. And you go back to 2021, 60% of the running backs in that range outplayed their ADP or positional ADP, 58% in 2022 and 56% in 2023. It's an area where we've seen guys like James Conner, Leonard Fournette, Devin Singletary, AJ Dillon, even going back a few years. These guys who there's ambiguity to them and you're not sure exactly what you're going to get out of them, but they end up absolutely smashing their value if they fall into a defined role within their offense. So if I can leave every draft having taken at least 2 running backs between pick 72 and 110, I always feel fairly good. Back on the clock for myself, it feels like this might be the range where I'm going to have to start keeping an eye on Baker Mayfield, but I'm not going to take him just yet because it's good 15 picks away. I'm not in on Pat Freiermuth. We'll talk about him in a minute. So, this doesn't feel great. Let's take Blake Corum, who's fallen 20 spots past ADP.
Nice.
I think that betting on the Rams in general feels like a really strong choice. I now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 running backs, so that should be an easy position for me to sit on. But yeah, I'm not sure why Blake Corum's fallen that many spots. He feels like a fine pick to me at his ADP at the moment. Andrew, you're 1 pick away. What are you looking to do here after you lock down Tua to your Jalen Waddle stack before?
Yeah, I'm going to go with a wide receiver that I believe I have in. So FantasyPros has sleeper rankings like they did last year. We're allowed to pick certain players. I think 4 receivers, 4 running backs, 2 tight ends, 2 quarterbacks that are without or outside a certain ECR range. And one of the receivers I have in my top 4 sleepers is Michael Wilson, second-year wide receiver from the Arizona Cardinals. I know we're all just assuming, projecting Marvin Harrison is going to just step in day one, command a 30% target share. You're not going to see any other receiver on the Cardinals get a single target. Maybe that happens, but I'm a little bit suspect of that happening. And I think that Michael Wilson flashed a lot as a rookie. He showed some chemistry with Kyler Murray during the last 4 weeks of that season. And I've already drafted a bunch of Cardinals anyway, so I'm kind of hitching my wagon out there in the West to Arizona. So if this Cardinals offense performs above average, like top 10 offense, then we're going to see some of these number 2 player roles have big spikes in production. And I think Michael Wilson can kind of fit that mold.
Yeah, he played 12 games his rookie year and was averaging like 79% of snaps. But in the 4 games he played with Kyler Murray, he saw 19 targets and ran a route on 91% of dropbacks. Like, he was a player they just seemed to really like. I think that he's going to be very clearly within a good role on that offense, and he's just got the build for it. You know, this is a 6'2", 213-pound wide receiver who came out in a draft class which wasn't full of good-sized wide receivers. There was a lot of undersized players there last year, so it feels like maybe he kind of went under the radar a little bit, and now with Kyler Murray healthy, second off season in this offense, the defense is still going to be bad. It's going to push them into shootouts. Yeah, I like taking Michael Wilson plenty. You took Gabe Davis with your next pick at 147th overall. Are you finding him a harder click? Now we're getting reports that Brian Thomas is performing really well at training camp.
This is definitely just a better and best ball pick. I would never touch Gabe Davis in a redraft where I had to project what week he was going to start. This is a bet on this offense just being high-flying passing attack. Gabe Davis should have a full-time role in this offense. I am all in on Brian Thomas. That's the Jacksonville Jaguars wide receiver that I want the most. But Gabe Davis still has shown that, hey, this guy can post spike weeks. He's a big play threat. So yeah, there are going to be games where he gets 0 points and you're going to be really frustrated that you draft him in redraft. But in best ball, I don't need to worry about which weeks he's going to go off. And the weeks he's going to go off are usually going to be the games where it's a high scoring affair between Jacksonville and whoever they're playing that particular week. So I do think it is the Brian Thomas show, but Gabe Davis, again, the one positive thing about him from training camp has been he's been one of Trevor Lawrence's guys in the red zone. So unless this Evan Ingram preseason red zone usage carries over, I think Evan Ingram had more red zone targets in that one preseason game than he might have had all last season.
Yeah, and the thing with Evan Ingram is we know that his production completely spikes when Christian Kirk's out. Like, if
even in the
you go
preseason.
yeah, you go and look at the splits, and it's just so pronounced that I find Evan Ingram a difficult click. But if Christian Kirk's going to miss time, then yeah, maybe it is Evan Ingram, Gabe Davis, Brian Thomas season. I took Jalen McMillan, who he's definitely rising up draft boards. I took him slightly ahead of ADP. I was trying to decide whether to take Baker Mayfield there and push Jalen McMillan, or take Jalen McMillan and push Baker Mayfield. This could be one that absolutely backfires on me, because now I've got 3 players from the Tampa Bay offense, and if Baker Mayfield doesn't come back around to me, I'm going to look awfully stupid. Andrew, this is your chance to outright win this draft. And the comments, they'll be coming for me. They'll be saying, oh, the stupid English guy doesn't know how to draft. I'm ready for it. You think I haven't heard about it before? But look, Baker Mayfield and Jalen McMillan both had an ADP around 162 to 164. So they were the 2 players who were hands down my targets in this range. I didn't necessarily want a massive Buccaneers stack in this draft, but it's just kind of lined up perfectly for me. It's worked out all right. And there's currently Matthew Stafford and Aaron Rodgers both still on the clock. I am 1 pick away. The team ahead of me has Lamar Jackson. They don't have any Buccaneers. Yeah. They take Matthew Stafford to stack with Cooper Kupp. I breathe a sigh of relief. And Baker Mayfield comes back to me. So I do have the Bucs mega stack of McMillan, Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin. I don't know if McMillan is going to pay off his ADP if both Godwin and Evans still have good seasons. Are you drafting a lot of McMillan?
So McMillan, I think him and Polk are so interesting to me, because if they had played in any other offense where it wasn't them and Odunze kind of eating into each other's production, we probably would have been talking about them much differently when it comes to their final box score. So I think that they all getting very strong draft capital overall, I think was just a clear indication that, hey, these guys are pretty good. So don't underrate them. So I think that one of Polk or McMillan is definitely going to outplay where they're being drafted. So I think that it's definitely worth it to just take shots on both guys.
Yep. So you're back on the clock with Andrei Yoshevich in the 14th round. Andrew, when you joined my channel earlier this offseason and we were drafting on another platform, I think we took Yoshevich in the 20th round. Is there a price which is yeah. Is there a price which is getting too expensive for the Bengals' 3rd wide receiver, or are you just happy to keep going for now?
I mean, he just fits my build really well. I already have T. Higgins. So again, I don't want to bet against Jamar Chase, but in the range of world where Jamar Chase maybe isn't as prolific as I project him to be, well, this is the roster that's going to benefit the most. So call it a hedge, call it what you want. But look, I'm looking at the receiver board. That's who I liked. I am eyeing a particular quarterback to get on my way back. And I know that I didn't need to take the quarterback there because I was confident that he would fall back to me. So I would have waited for Yoshevich if I had one more pick, but I'm here now and I get to pick the guy I wanted, and that was Geno Smith. So I'm stacking him with Jackson Smith-Njigba. Tom, do you look to stack? I mean, obviously you were trying to stack Baker Mayfield, so maybe that was a dumb question. How aggressively are you stacking, should I say?
So this year I've eased back on the big stacks as much. I mean, and obviously that seems a bit stupid when I'm sitting here with a Tampa Bay mega stack. So what I kind of found, particularly looking into DraftKings drafts, was that teams in the finals, they didn't have as many mega stacks as I expected. So I've been trying to ease back, and it's a priority for me. I don't want a quarterback without at least one pass catcher. You can slightly expand that to include running backs as well. But for me, if I draft a quarterback without a pass catcher, it just feels like a wasted opportunity. I've been saying that this person is worth that pick, and all of a sudden then I have them without any of the rest of their offense. So yeah, definitely bounce back and forth on it. But over here on drafters, I would say it's not as much of a priority, because you aren't looking for a single week where the ceiling outcomes of one team is going to propel you up the leaderboard in the way that it does in DFS. But if there's a week where the Bucs go nuclear and Mike Evans has a 30-point game. Chris Godwin has a 20-point game. Baker Mayfield's having like a 30-point game. There's potential there still for me to climb up the leaderboard in a meaningful way still, because I'm putting up huge points. So it's a tricky one. There's definitely nuance to it. I would say that ultimately, if you can try and stack your quarterback with at least one pass catcher or at least one running back, then as long as that offense is doing well, then you are still getting more from that kind of ethos around stacking. And it's definitely something I'm always mindful of when I'm taking my quarterbacks. I don't know how many times this offseason I've taken a quarterback unstacked. Maybe in playoff formats, there's occasionally the situation where you look to like week 17 bringbacks and go, okay, I'm locked out of quarterback here. Who does that quarterback play against in week 17? Can I bet on that game being nuclear and grab some pass catches from the opposing side? But here on Drafters week 17, we don't need to worry about remembering all those fixtures, because by week 17, we're hoping that there's going to be an absolute gap between ourselves at the 1 and 2 position at the top of the leaderboard, and then we can just sit back and see who scores the most points week 17 and which one of us walks away with 500 grand.
I hope I either know like by week 10 whether, okay, I'm coasting, I'm going to make it, or I'm like, well, this team is totally dead, does not have a single shot in the world to get there. So you went with Demarcus Robinson while you were talking about stacks, and now you're up again on the clock. You can't take Rashad Bateman because he got taken before you. So they clearly know that you're a Ravens fan.
Yeah, this one might hurt Andrew, but I'm gonna take Noah Fant. He slipped slightly past ADP. I know that might have hurt your Seahawks hopes, but I was looking for a tight end, and I didn't want anybody who had the same bye week as Dalton Kincaid, who has a week 12 bye. I didn't want anyone with a week 14 bye, because I want to maximize the amount of players who could potentially fill out my flex spot, because the tight ends can still fill out the flex spot. And I do have a few of those week 14 buys already. I also have a bunch of week 11 buys thanks to my Bucks stack. So having Noah Fant on week 10, it made plenty of sense. I would have been open to taking Tyler Conklin, but he had a week 12 buy, the same as Dalton Kincaid. So yeah, really for me, it was either Noah Fant or K-Dot, and here I'm just making the bet wide receivers for the Bucks had taken all the pass catching, so I had to lean into that. So I got Noah Fant, you took K-Dot, and so we swapped tight ends for our stacks. How are you feeling?
I don't even like K-Dot. I just took him because you took my tight end, so I'm taking K-Dot, and technically he doesn't have the same bye week as Mark Andrews, so I think this is probably the first time I've ever drafted K-Dot this year. And I'm betting against you, Tom. There you go. See, I bet K-Dot's going to be the number one target on the Buccaneers, and you're going to be like, man, why did I take Noah Fant? He's injured, man. He's not even going to be ready. Big L, Tom. Big L.
Excellent. I love it. Let's get some more smack talk in this room. Ben Sinnott kind of coming up in ADP. He was a player I wasn't in on, and he started draft season going at like pick 140, and then he completely plummeted, and then he's kind of raised back up. But then this week we saw some reports that he's done okay in training camp, but he fails to separate. I'll let you make your pick, Andrew, and then give me your thoughts on where Ben Sinnott's at the minute.
Ben Sinnott is interesting because he looks more like a fullback than a traditional tight end. And the less and less we've seen of Zach Ertz in the preseason, I think is a major red flag for Ben Sinnott and what we could see his role be early on in the year. Look, is it a similar bet to, James Conner's not going to last the entire year, so you're going to get Ben Sinnott in a second half surge? Yeah, you could see that. Or you could see it's the Trey McBride route, and we're going to see Ben Sinnott break out in year 2, where he's buried behind Zach Ertz the entire season. So that's annoying. I think that Zach Ertz actually, again, he's in my queue, because I think Zach Ertz, especially in full PPR, they just traded Jahan Dotson, who is the next receiver behind Terry McLaurin on the Washington Commanders. I'm not sure they want it to necessarily be Ben Sinnott, even though we saw him flash that big playability, yards after the catch. Something that Zach Ertz only wishes and dreams he could do is break a tackle. Still can't do it. Ben Sinnott, I think, broke more tackles in that one play in the preseason than Ertz has done in his entire NFL career, at least according to the Twitter profile of Zach Ertz didn't break a tackle. So that's kind of how I'm viewing the Commanders room. And Zach Ertz, to me, look, I would strongly consider drafting him in that league I was talking about earlier, where I end up getting Dallas Goedert, because I think we're going to look up after week 1 and, oh, wow, Zach Ertz, 10 targets against the Buccaneers in week 1. Who would have thought that? But in that Cliff Kingsbury offense that he's the most familiar with, I think that he's going to get targets. Is it going to be great? No, it's going to be catch and fall down. But hey, that works, especially in a full PPR setting.
Yeah, so we are heading into the last 3 rounds now. I have Bijan Robinson, Nico Collins, Mike Evans, Zay Flowers, Dalton Kincaid, Chris Godwin, CJ Stroud, Javonte Williams, Brian Robinson, Jonathan Brooks, Brandon Cooks, Blake Corum, Jalen McMillan, Baker Mayfield, Demarcus Robinson, Noah Fant, and then Tim Patrick, which maybe I'm just buying the camp hype a little bit, but I would love to see Tim Patrick succeed, and taking him at this range of the draft, round 17 onwards, I don't worry about ADP too much. It's more just about getting players with roles. Andrew, Breece Hall, Jalen Waddle, DJ Moore, T. Higgins, Mark Andrews, James Conner, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Jalen Warren, Tony Pollard, Trey Benson, Tua, Michael Wilson, Gabe Davis, Andre Yoshevich, Geno Smith, K. Dotton, and Drake May. How you feeling about your team?
I like the team overall. I wasn't sure if I loved picking Drake May there, but kind of based on where he was going, the other quarterbacks in his range. Look, I think Drake May has shown through the preseason that he's got the fantasy football toolkit that we're looking for. He's a guy that's looking to extend plays, use his legs, throw the ball aggressively downfield. Yeah, that's what we want. Is he going to last the entire season? Probably not, because Jacoby Brissett may not even start week 1 because he's injured, because the offensive line can't block. So that is a big concern. But getting as my third quarterback, I think that when Drake May hits my lineup, it's because he had a big spike week. That's going to be the reason why. I'm not drafting him for the longevity. I think I got that from Tua and Geno. Those guys I feel good about in their roles as my QB1 and QB2. But QB3, I want to kind of throw the dice or roll the dice a little bit, especially with, I haven't drafted a lot of teams in this particular tournament. So like you said, if you're not volume drafting, then it really more is about getting your guys. And I think after at least what we've seen in the preseason, I think that I view Drake May in a higher regard in what he could potentially do this year, because the injury, especially to Jacoby, if he's really banged up, then that may force the Patriots' hand. And you already heard Gerard Mayo come out and say after the preseason week 3 game that Drake May has outplayed Jacoby Brissett, and he just started. So it's just a matter of time before they name May the starter, or he becomes a starter after week 1, week 2, when they find out that Jacoby is just, this isn't going to work with Jacoby in this offense, and that May just might be the better version of someone that can actually lead this offense just based on the restraints that Brissett is working with.
Yeah, and I've been team play your rookie quarterbacks all the way, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But, you know, Drake May played behind a bad offensive line last year at North Carolina. He played with poor weapons ever since, you know, particularly over the last year. So I just don't feel like there's much of a downgrade to what he's got around him in New England, and it would be nice to see him have a chance to develop. Perhaps he gets banged up, but I just don't see the advantage to playing Jacoby Brissett for a long period at this point in his career. You take Tucker Kraft, who we have talked about plenty this offseason. Plenty of reports that Luke Musgrave isn't looking particularly, he's not looking unimpressive, but he's not blowing the doors off anything at training camp. Meanwhile, Tucker Kraft's apparently doing well. Are you ready for Tucker Kraft to take over this tight end room?
I think so. I've been ready since I saw Tucker Kraft play last year. And we saw again, I can't say it was because Tucker Kraft was a starting tight end in the second half of the year that the Packers offense really took off. But that did happen. It did happen when he was the starting tight end and it wasn't Luke Musgrave. So I viewed them very close in proximity when they were prospects coming out. Obviously, Musgrave got drafted first, so that gives him the nod. He gets to earn the starting role. And I mean, how did he not have this starting role locked down? Tucker Kraft missed the entire offseason, and yet, Kraft shows back up and they're like, wow, look at this guy. Yep. So for me, I think that's just such a tell. And look, you remember what happened with the Ravens. They drafted Hayden Hurst first, who ended up being the better tight end, Mark Andrews. So I'm not going to just be a slave to the draft capital when I think that Kraft is the better player. So that's the tight end I think is going to be the Green Bay Packers tight end 1 this year, and I'm going to draft him accordingly.
Yep. So you've got your round 19 pick here. See, who are you going with, Andrew? Alexander Mattison. I mean, I don't mind taking Alexander Mattison at this point in the draft. I think that there's definitely a world where Zamir White does not pay off his ADP. Dameon Pierce went a few picks beforehand, and I tweeted over the weekend, I have no idea how to approach Dameon Pierce. There were conflicting reports about whether he was having a good training camp. He hasn't really put up any numbers in the preseason games, and Cam Akers has been nuclear in those games, pulling like 3 spin moves in a row at the weekend. Are you back in on Cam Akers, or do you think that Dameon Pierce, even if he ends up getting traded somewhere, has enough upside that he can be the kind of player that we should be taking?
I mean, Dameon Pierce showed his rookie year that he can be a really productive running back in the right scheme. So I feel like that can't be going unnoticed by the NFL. The NFL can't look at Pierce and think, oh my God, this guy almost had 1,000 rushing yards as a rookie and then just turned into total dust in year 2. Again, the offensive line was injured for the Houston Texans at the beginning of last year, so that did not help Dameon Pierce, but the scheme just does not fit his style. So again, his MO with Pierce at college level, at the NFL level, he's never really been a guy that can assert himself in a backfield. If the backfield is easy and there's no competition, when it was Rex Burkhead and Dario Agumawale in year 1, yeah, it was easy for Pierce to just slide in and be like, I'm the RB1. But once Devin Singletary started to push him, I mean, we just saw things kind of flame out. So look, I think that if I was thinking more clearly and not emotionally damaged by Cam Akers, I would say, oh yeah, like I'm right back in on Cam Akers. But this guy is, oh God, he's emotionally damaged me to the point where I feel like I can't come to Cam Akers' aid, but at the same time, he does look like the RB2. Why wouldn't he? I mean, he's looked great. Ian Hartitz had tweeted out that, again, all he needed was both Achilles tears to even out, and now he's out here doing all the spin moves, and it's just absolutely perfect. So
yeah,
I think that Pierce, we talked about this before we started recording, but his preseason usage, the up and down, just the weirdness of it, it just reminds you a lot of Dotson and what happened to Dotson. Dotson got traded. So I think Pierce is probably, there's just too much smoke, I think, and too much running back need where teams are searching. Maybe he goes to Dallas, maybe he goes to some other team that I think someone's going to be interested in Dameon Pierce based on just what he did as a rookie. And it's probably going to cost a 6th-round draft pick because he was a 4th-round draft pick. So it's going to cost nothing to try to get him. I think some team's going to pull the trigger.
Yeah, I think there's too many teams it would make sense for. Like, you tell me that he couldn't go to the Cowboys or the Chargers and immediately be useful on those rosters. Like, Dameon Pierce, maybe he is more scheme dependent than some running backs out there, but yeah. I mean, and also, let's just take a moment to appreciate Cam Akers. Like,
Yes.
Incredible to see a player coming off 2 Achilles tears and making it back to the point where he looks like he's going to have a job in the NFL. Even the Texans beat reporters didn't expect him to actually be on the team, and he's impressed such a level it seems very hard for them to cut him. I am 1 pick away from making my final pick, and then I will recap my team as this gets around to Andrew's team. The one player I wanted there, Roman Wilson, did go getting sniped in the 20th round. This is the world we live in. We're going to miss these moments when drafting season is over. Sadly, there's not too many players I like, but I'm going to take Cedric Tillman, bet on that kind of wide receiver emerging in Cleveland. Maybe it's with Deshaun Watson, maybe it's not. So my draft finished with Bijan Robinson, Nico Collins, Mike Evans, Zay Flowers, Dalton Kincaid, Chris Godwin, CJ Stroud. A pure hero RB build for me there, with my second RB coming in round 8, where then I hammered that position and went Javonte Williams, Brian Robinson, Jonathan Brooks. Then I went Brandon Cooks, Blake Corum, Jalen McMillan, Baker Mayfield, DeMarcus Robinson, Noah Fant, Tim Patrick, Will Shipley, Theo Johnson, and then Cedric Tillman to round it out. So for me, there was a clear point in this draft where I had to decide if I was going with 2 quarterbacks or 3. CJ Stroud is kind of on the cusp of that elite quarterback tier, and if I'm saying that he can make a jump into the elite quarterback tier and pay off and do what I need him to do, go nuclear, but I'm kind of already saying that I could probably get by with 2. Once I'd started stacking the Buccaneers, it was pretty clear that I'm making a big bet on their offense. So I'm also saying, okay, the Texans are going to be very good. The Bucs are going to be very good. And I wouldn't have minded adding a 3rd quarterback, but it needed to come later on when we were past your Geno Smith pick in the kind of Aaron Rodgers, Darnold, Derek Carr, Drake May, Daniel Jones, Bo Nix territory. And there was enough of a run on those guys that by the time it got back to me, I didn't like them. I didn't want to go Bryce Young and then try and scramble about to stack him with someone. I didn't want Gardner Minshew for all the reasons talked about with Devontae Adams earlier. And then Russell Wilson, I didn't want him either because who knows how many games he's actually going to play before sitting on your bench for the rest of the time. So instead, I just bulked out the wide receiver room a lot, went with guys like Tim Patrick, Demarcus Robinson, who might be floor plays rather than ceiling plays, but I've got my ceiling plays in guys like Jalen McMillan, Cedric Tillman, and then towards the top of the draft, guys like Nico Collins and Zay Flowers. 3 tight ends in Theo Johnson, Noah Fant, and Dalton Kincaid. So yeah, for me, this feels like a fun team. Maybe the 2 quarterbacks versus 3 is the one that possibly lets me down here, but I feel well covered at the wide receiver, running back, and tight end position. Andrew, you were drafting out of the 3 slot, and you came away with Breece Hall, Jalen Waddle, DJ Moore, T. Higgins, Mark Andrews, James Conner, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Jalen Warren, Tony Pollard, Trey Benson, Tua to stack with Jalen Waddle, Michael Wilson, Gabe Davis, Andre Yoshevich, Geno stacked with JSN, K. Dotton, Drake May, Tucker Kraft, Alexander Mattison, and of course, the man that Dennis Allen hates, Kendre Miller in the 20th round. How you feeling about it?
Somebody had to throw Kendre Miller a bone. Okay. Look, I think that he's actually a better pick in the playoff format best ball because look, what happens when Dennis Allen gets fired? Okay. You know who's not going to be the doghouse anymore? Kendre Miller. Because he won't be able to be the doghouse because the doghouse will be removed from the facility. So there'll be no more doghouse for him to be in. So Kendre Miller, to me, look, this is all just related on the coach relationship. That's what it all is based on. Yes, he's injured and he hasn't been able to practice or basically do anything. But Kendre Miller was someone before all this injuries, before Dennis Allen talked about how he says he doesn't like him, but it's pretty clear like how he feels about Kendre Miller. Look, is Kendre Miller going to get cut? We're talking about Dameon Pierce. Oh, what if he gets cut? What if Kendre Miller gets cut and someone else picks him up? Someone that knows what they're doing. I could see Kendre Miller. I mean, he's free. He's 20th round. I think that he's too good of a player. What if he was an injured rookie? Jonathan Brooks is an injured rookie that we're really excited about. Okay, I'm just going to view Kendre Miller the exact same way. An injured rookie, right? Because he basically barely played as a rookie his first year in the league. So that's defending my 20th round pick again. I don't need to go too insane defending my pick in round 20. But again, probably drafted too many running backs. But hey, it's 2024. I like to draft running backs. It's okay. And I thought about Javon Baker stacking him with Drake May. That would have been probably my only alternative to do another receiver instead of a running back. But I just decided, hey, if it wasn't Kendre Miller, I probably would have gone in that direction. But I just think, look, man, if Dennis Allen's not in the picture, then I think Kendre Miller is going to see a role, and he is going to have a role on offense. So overall, I do like my running back room. This is kind of my Andrew Erickson du jour of late round 0 running back targets. Warren, Tony Pollard, Trey Benson. Haven't been drafting a lot of Alexander Mattison in particular, but I just don't believe in Zamir White for long term. And I just think it'd be so ironic for this year's Alexander Mattison to be the guy that Alexander Mattison takes over for. That just to me seems like it's too poetic to not happen. So that's the pick on Madison. And the receivers, I feel good about. Again, probably would have wanted more of them, but I do feel good about all of them. It's probably not my strongest receiver or skill group, and I probably need some injuries to kind of go my way with some of these alphas because I drafted basically essentially all number 2 and 3 receivers outside of DJ Moore. But hey, injuries happen. So you could see these guys having bigger roles. And again, if I can just capture those spike weeks, I should be good. And of course, I got my 2 favorite tight ends plus K. Dotton. So I can't complain.
Yeah, at one point, I'll just go back to on my team, when I made the decision to not go 3 quarterback, the reason I piled up on wide receivers and went up to 9 wide receivers is because in this format, you start 3 wide receivers, 2 running backs, and 1 flex. So the most running backs you're ever going to start is 3, but the most wide receivers you can ever start is 4. And look, I'm a bit of a 0 RB zealot when it comes to it, and I'm always going to lean towards the wide receivers. So yeah, do leave us a comment and tell us which of these teams you preferred if you were going to build one. Love to hear whether it's my team, which of course will be, or Andrew's, which is still an okay team. And if you want to jump into the Drafters Million, it really is going to be a lot of fun over the next 10 days. There are drafts going off constantly. It is $15 an entry. Remember, as The less entries in this contest, the more plus EV it is going to be. It is barely 50% full at the minute. It is not going to fill. They are getting about 4,000 entries per day, and they need about twice that to fill it, so it's going to be even easier to get into the paid places. The top 28,800 places are paid. Use code FantasyPros for a 100% deposit match up to $100. That's over 6 free entries when you sign up and deposit using the code FantasyPros. Use the link in the description to redeem this offer and join the contest today. Myself and Andrew, we're going to be back later this week talking all the fallout of players being cut from rosters, all the situations which have changed for you to be aware of going into your final fantasy drafts before the NFL season kicks off. Andrew, it's so close, man. Can you feel it?
I can feel it. It's so close. Every time I turn on the X account, I just see more people asking me more questions, and I absolutely love it. My head is spinning. I stare at the ceiling at night wondering, oh my God, is there a show that I need to prepare for? Am I supposed to be live on camera right now with Tom? What time is it in England? What time is it in the UK? I need to make sure I'm live. So super excited about that show, breaking down all the cuts. That'll be coming later this week, and just more content's coming on the pod. Again, hop in the Discord, ask us questions. We want to help. So do whatever you can. Should be a great time.
If you want to see more Best Ball content here on the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel, let us know in the comments. Let us know in your podcast reviews, because me and Andrew, we want to draft more teams and help you crush your Best Ball drafts next year. We'll be back very soon. Appreciate everyone hanging out tonight. We will catch you again.